This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for joining us. Yesterday on the show, we brought you the charming healthcare worker who took to social media to encourage women to get out there, get on dating apps, all with the intention of hurting ICE officers. Here's part of her seriously deranged rant.
Are the single ladies where these ICE guys are going have a chance to do something, you know, not without risk, but could help the cause for sure. Get on Tinder, get on Hinge, find these guys. They're around. They're an ICE agent, bring some X-Lax and put it in their drinks. Get them sick. You know, nobody's gonna die. Just enough to incapacitate them, get them off the street for the next day. Highly easily deniable. You know, you could get sick too. Won't eat there again. I'm just saying, let's get them where they eat.
Yeah, and there's so much more. She kept posting and really inspiring stuff like that. This woman was working as a nurse and she has now lost her job. Virginia Commonwealth University Health said in a statement to Fox News Digital, following an investigation, the individual involved in the social media video is no longer employed by VCU Health. Now, the hospital and police are investigating the woman over those posts. But what we're still seeing on our screens every day, not just our phone screens, our TV screens, are people on the left screaming Nazi, comparing ICE officers to Nazis. We've heard it from Democrats like Tim Walz, and now left-wing comedians like Stephen Colbert are using it as material for their jokes.
Bavino went on complaining.
Look, Dana, they're trying to portray Border Patrol agents and ICE agents as Gestapo, Nazi, and many other words.
Yes, do not compare ICE or Border Patrol agents to the Nazis. That's an unfair comparison. The Nazis were willing to show their faces.
Slow clap for Stephen Colbert. I mean, is anyone still surprised that his show has been cancelled? His show will be finishing up in May. And then there's Jimmy Kimmel, the guy who lied about Charlie Kirk's murder, cried about it only because he was suspended for a week. Well, he's now brought out the tears on stage once again.
If our leaders are intentionally creating and encouraging violence and fear, then I hope you will also agree we need new leaders, because these are not leaders. And to the people of Minneapolis, to the Preddy family and the Good family, and these people who were looking out for their neighbors, we want you to know that we are with you and you are not alone. And I'll tell you another thing. We also want to see those Epstein files already.
Yeah. He's such a fake actor. I mean, there were no tears for Charlie Kirk, Irina Zavrutska, or Laken Riley, the 22-year-old nursing student who was killed by an illegal immigrant. Look, I think what happened in Minnesota is absolutely tragic, I do. But obstructing law enforcement operations while armed with a gun, it's not a great idea. And if people keep hearing that ICE officers are Nazis from Democrats, from the mainstream media, you're just going to be seeing more people wanting to take to the streets and wanting to get in the way of ICE operations. Just finally, on the media's coverage of all of this, Joe Rogan has blasted MS Now, formerly known as MSNBC, for apparently editing the photograph of Alex Preddy to make him look more attractive in their media coverage. Look at this.
Did you see what MSNBC did to his image?
Yeah, where they gussied
Basically
it up.
did the opposite of what CNN did to me. You know, CNN during the COVID times turned me green, and they made me ugly and look like I was dying, and they made him handsome.
Yeah.
So people would be more sympathetic to him getting shot, which is kind of wild. Like, are ugly people less valuable to MSNBC?
Less marketable?
That is crazy to me. Like, look at the difference.
Yeah.
Look at the difference. They shortened up his face. They gave him a little bit of a tan. They widened his face a little bit, it seems like. They just made him a little handsomer.
Yeah,
A little hotter.
They gave him a bit of that Chad jaw, didn't they?
They shrunk his nose a little too, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
They shrunk his nose,
Yeah.
gave him a little bit of a handsome jaw. So he looks like an
It even
American.
made him, if you look at the shoulders, it even looks like they may have plumped up the shoulders there a bit.
A little bit, yeah. The one on the right looks like he's a little plumper. Yeah. They changed the tone of the color. Wild.
I mean, MS now, they're not even trying to rebuild trust. The way they just lie to you, lie to their audience, so embarrassing. Coming up, Donald Trump warns Iran that time is running out, with strikes potentially days away. Keir Starmer's flagship migrant program has been branded a total farce following revelations that Labor has been taking in more migrants from France than it has deported, no surprise. And we'll be joined by our panel to cover a lot of what is going on in the United States as Nicki Minaj claims that she's Trump's #1 fan as the president launches Trump accounts. I have a special message here for my American viewers. It may be a new year, but for people out there buried in debt, it hardly means a fresh start. Whether you're struggling with credit cards, personal loans, or medical bills, you'll want to hear about today's sponsor. PDS Debt has an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, nearly 5 stars on Trustpilot, and thousands of positive real-life reviews. PDS actually works to understand your unique financial situation and craft a personalised relief plan tailored to your needs. Don't let another month of interest pile up. Take back control in 30 seconds. Get your free personalised assessment and the best option for you at pdsdebt.com/power. That's pdsdebt.com/power. President Donald Trump is warning Iran that time is running out. Joining us now is Benem Ben Taleblu, Iran Program Senior Director at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for your time. Look, a US strike against Iran could just be days away now as more warships arrive in the Middle East. And the president, of course, weighs up one of the most important decisions of his presidency. Donald Trump has been keeping Iran guessing about his intentions. Earlier this week, he told Axios that Tehran had reached out on numerous occasions and that Iran wants to make a deal. But it's, of course, unclear what Iran could offer, given that the regime is unlikely to release the thousands of protesters it has arrested and also unlikely to suddenly abandon its nuclear program. Overnight, Donald Trump has issued what could be the final warning to Iran, posting on Truth Social. A massive armada is heading to Iran. It is moving quickly with great power, enthusiasm and purpose. It is a larger fleet headed by the great aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln than that sent to Venezuela. Like with Venezuela, it is ready, willing and able to rapidly fulfill its mission with speed and violence if necessary. Hopefully, Iran will quickly come to the table and negotiate a fair and equitable deal. No nuclear weapons, one that is good for all parties. Time is running out. It is truly of the essence. As I told Iran once before, make a deal. They didn't. And there was Operation Midnight Hammer, a major destruction of Iran. The next attack will be far worse. Benem, what's going to happen here?
Great to be with you. I think President Trump has everybody right where he wants them, which is both allies and adversaries alike are left guessing. The president did seem to extend one final diplomatic off-ramp here. The question is, after having drawn 8 or 9 red lines not related to the nuclear program, not related to the missile program, and not even related to transnational terrorism, but rather to the horrible situation on the ground inside Iran throughout the month of January, there really is no nuclear deal to be had with a regime that has killed its own people this way. Oh, and by the way, doesn't have the uranium enrichment capacity to actually produce a nuclear bomb today, thanks to President Trump's historic and successful use of force just 6 months ago against the regime's enrichment facilities. So President Trump does have all eyes on him. The question is, will he use military force, and towards what larger political end will that force be applied?
If Donald Trump does decide to strike, the most likely targets are the commanders of the IRGC and the command centres. How strong is the IRGC right now?
Well, there have been some reports, as you mentioned, that talk about holding those responsible for the crackdown, and that's just not only the IRGC. which is the parallel ideological military that exists in Iran. But an element of its ground forces is this all-volunteer paramilitary unit reported in the several millions called the Basij. Underneath that, of course, there's also the law enforcement forces or the national police, which has a subgroup called the special units, which have been particularly active against protesters. And lest we forget, it's not just Iranians from the regime killing the protesting population, but it's foreign Shia militias, reportedly Iraqi Shia militias, 3 of which are designated foreign terrorist organizations and have American blood on their hands, have reportedly crossed the border from Iraq into Iran and are active inside Iran on behalf of the Islamic Republic as well.
There are reports that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei will flee, that he'll flee Iran and potentially go down with the ship, so to speak. Do you expect that's going to happen?
I actually saw some of the reports earlier about a potential Assad option where Khamenei exits the country, flees to Russia, or one of the few places that might offer him such a home. But I actually don't see that as within the character of Iran's 86-year-old and highly ideological supreme leader. He's more likely to make you burn through the country to get him. His playbook really does seem to be going down with the ship and taking as much of the state's institutions with him. One wonders if thereby the U.S. might be able to avoid the cost of quote unquote burning through the country if political targeting is on the agenda for the Trump administration at all. That's an open question. But make no mistake, I think Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei is someone who has lived his anti-American and anti-Israeli worldviews and doesn't seem to be the kind of person who would flee and be willingly, peacefully able to turn over power to democracy-seeking pro-Western and pro-Israel protesters.
Look, the known death toll from the crackdown on protesters is growing each day. A US-based group said that the number of people killed in the protest against the regime in Iran has exceeded 6,000. But an attack by the US on Iran, it would send a powerful message of support to the protest movement and would, of course, undoubtedly weaken the regime even further.
Certainly, I think at this point it would. You know, the one real question Iranians have been asking when you can get a limited hold of them via either they directly call via landline or through fits and starts of internet connectivity is when will he strike? It's really the open question right now for so many Iranians. You know, Iranians are a highly nationalistic population, but to the extent that they've now turned their heads abroad looking for some kind of a potential call in the cavalry moment, potentially from the Trump administration, potentially from Israel, who knows, to stand with them in their hour of need. Unlike many places in the Middle East, Iran hasn't had this level of state violence, and really the 20th century hasn't seen this level of state violence across the world in such a short period of time. One does, unfortunately, have to go back to the Holocaust, to the 1940s, 1941 in particular, Bob Yar in Ukraine, to see similar rates of a massive crackdown. And that's why I think so many Iranians are wondering, if not now, when.
Iran has ramped up its threats to retaliate and would see, Iran says it would see any attack as an all-out war. What response would we be, is it likely that we would see?
Well, the primary tool of deterrence by punishment for the Islamic Republic remains its ballistic missile force, which is largely assumed to be the biggest in the entire Middle East. We saw what these ballistic missiles could do during 3 separate missile exchanges, April, October 2024, and then June 2025 against Israel. But make no mistake, there are credible, well-layered allied and American air and missile defenses in the region that are largely able to intercept these. But even the 16% of Iranian ballistic missiles that were able to penetrate through Israel and allied layered air and missile defense in the region still did significant damage in Israel during the 12-day war. And it's really more of the threat or ability to destroy rather than to create, which is the Islamic Republic's only card here. It's that they could basically light parts of the region on fire. And that's why, to deter this Iranian move at deterrence by punishment, Washington is bringing more military assets to outpace and overmatch Iran's large ballistic missile force.
And Republican Senator Ted Cruz is calling on the US to arm Iranian protesters. In a post to X, he wrote, "We should be arming the protesters in Iran now for the Iranian people to overthrow the Ayatollah, a tyrant who routinely chants death to America, would make America much, much safer." What do you make of this?
I'm not sure about that. If the U.S. is going to be using the military option, it itself, qualified military professionals should be using the military option rather than trying to take a fairly moderate protesting population in the Middle East and trying to train them and give them arms. I think the Iranians are looking for that foreign military support, that promise that President Trump had offered them, that quote unquote help was on the way. That doesn't mean, barrels of Kalashnikovs, but that does mean, low intensity things that actually can help level the playing field between the street and the state, to fully turn the internet back on, to hold the repression apparatus accountable, to begin to pave the way to get this regime out of the Iranian people's way. These are not the first time Iranian people have been protesting against the Islamic Republic. It certainly won't be the last. But the question is, now that Washington has chosen to make this an issue about deterrence, about resolve, and about American credibility, will we be able to retain a pro-American population in Iran after we turn our back on them like this? That's an open question. And the way to fix that is not, pallets of AK-47s to protesters who have no experience with this. It is actually to have qualified military professionals and Western military support to provide air cover for protesting Iranians.
Ben Talablu, Iran Program Senior Director at Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you watch my reporting, you know I cover protests, political theatre, and media meltdowns. And what always strikes me is how disconnected the slogans are from real life. While activists shout ideology, ordinary people face rising prices, high taxes, and governments determined to make everything harder. We're told to trust the experts, trust media narratives, trust that massive spending and endless debt will make us better off. But history and common sense say otherwise. When leadership is weak and policy reckless, everyday people pay the price. That's why I believe in owning something real. Physical gold and silver from American Hartford Gold. Tangible assets that hold value through inflation and instability. With thousands of five-star reviews, they deliver gold and silver to your door or store securely in a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And right now, when you call and mention that I sent you, you could get up to $20,000 in free silver with your first purchase. Call 855-802-5199 or text POWER to 65532. That's 855-802-5199 or text POWER to 65532. Or click the link in the video description, because when politics turns into performance and the media loses the plot, it's worth protecting something that actually holds up in the chaos and outlasts all the trends. Joining us now is our panel, Signal Principal and pollster Alex Tarasio and CEO of the Alliance for Secure AI and political strategist Brendan Steinhauser. Thank you both for joining us. Let's start with the polling in the United States, and it's not good news for the Democrats. According to the latest Economist YouGov poll, only 29% of Americans have a very or somewhat favourable view of Democrats in Congress. Views on congressional Democrats have been getting worse and worse since the election last year. Now, this same poll found that Trump's support from independent voters has dropped, but among Republicans, Trump's net approval is still positive with 72 percentage points. Alex, what should we be making of the numbers here? What's your assessment?
So Trump still has very strong approval with Republicans, 72% in that poll. That's actually a little bit on the low side for what you should expect to be getting from your own party. And some of that is because the messiness around immigration raids. I think some of that is because of what we see in the economy. Just generally, people are feeling that the US economy is getting a little bit better, but they aren't necessarily feeling that in their own lives yet. We saw that in our January survey, that when it comes to your personal economic situation, people felt that it was getting slightly worse relative to when we asked that same question back in August. But when we do the same thing about the US economy, people do feel like it's getting slightly better compared to back in August. No matter what else is going on in the world, the economy really dominates how people feel, and particularly their own personal economy. And it's kind of a weird situation right now. And so that's why I think his numbers are ticking up, but they still have a long way to go, particularly with independents.
Okay, and we are going to circle back to the economy, but Brendan, I want to get your thoughts, what you make of the polling, and do you think it's consistent with what you're seeing on the ground?
It is. And look, I think for a long time, congressional Democrats, congressional Republicans have had pretty poor numbers overall. The approval rating of Congress has been very low for a long time. But somebody has to win the election. And so voters have to choose between the parties that they dislike the least, I guess, in the moment. I think the president's numbers are a little lower than where he'd like them to be. But look, he's also someone who's been in politics and has served and run multiple campaigns for president, winning twice, losing one. And so he's been in this arena. Those numbers aren't going to shift a whole lot, I don't think. But I do agree. I think that the economy is weighing on things. And yes, the images coming out of Minneapolis and all of the things going on with the border and immigration are definitely playing into the zeitgeist of the moment.
Let's talk about Minneapolis. As we know, Tom Homan has been sent there. We're hoping that it could be a potential reset. But we've also been hearing from Tim Walz. I mean, he's been comparing what ICE agents are doing to Nazi Germany, and he's absolutely playing politics. This is what he had to say yesterday. Okay, we don't have that grab, unfortunately, but it was seemed a little bit violent towards JD Vance. Alex, can I get your thoughts on Tim Walz? I know he's now going to be working with Donald Trump to kind of fix the situation in Minnesota, but in the lead up throughout all of January, I mean, his rhetoric has been pretty damaging.
It absolutely has. I mean, I'm here as a pollster, but I'm also an American, and the way that he is talking is incredibly irresponsible. And he is making comparisons that are actively radicalizing people, that are pushing people to get into the streets. And at the same time, he has stepped aside in his own ambitions to run for a third term for governor. He announced that he was not going to. He seems to be unburdened by what has been. And he is going out there and saying whatever is in his heart, I can only assume. I think it's really bad for the country. It's not even good for his politics because he doesn't have any reason to have good politics anymore. And so I can only assume that this is what he truly believes in. But I don't think it'll help him. I don't think it'll help the Democratic Party because that kind of really it's political extremism is what turns off independents. It turns off most Republicans, most Democrats, all but the most extreme edges of the fringes.
I think you're being very generous there, saying that this is something he truly believes. I think he's saying it intentionally. He's just got so much Trump derangement syndrome that he'll go so far to compare ICE agents doing their job to Nazis. Brendan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the governor is enjoying the moment, the sort of theater of things. He is on his way out. But look, I think they've got to turn down the temperature here. They've got to take a minute, take a deep breath. We've got to get things under control. The thing that matters the most is this public safety of the citizens of this country, and that does include not only keeping people safe on the streets there in Minneapolis, but also, the federal government being able to enforce the laws on the books. The voters did put this president in office to enforce those laws. It is one thing to protest peacefully and to film cops, which I think they have every right to do. But it's certainly another thing to, try and obstruct and visit violence upon officers. And obviously, too, we've seen some of the ICE officers use excessive force. I think anybody watching can see that as well. We have to put an end to that. We have to get peace back in our streets, and we have to just enforce the law. That's what the majority of Americans voted for. That's what the majority of independents and all Americans want, is enforce the law, let the federal government do the job it's meant to do. And there is certainly some responsibility clearly on the side of the administration to make sure they're doing so in a way that respects constitutional rights. And so it's a very fraught situation. And I think the governor and the mayor there and the president all need to get together and just sort of take things down a notch.
I believe we do actually have that grab of Tim Walz. Let's just play it now.
I would beat the out of him now if I could, and I would call that out. I mean, that's just different. In verbally going at it, my argument is much better. In making the case that housing prices are up because of immigration and that we should build on federal lands, it was such a crazy thing. But then when I watched him, I got sucked into that. And if you remember, this was right in that moment of eating dogs and cats. I took that bait and thought that that was the argument of how outrageous it was. That was not the argument.
I mean, he thinks he can beat the S out of JD Vance. Tim Walz is such a joke. He was really exposed earlier this year with Nick Shirley's YouTube video going to all the daycare centres and exposing how widespread the fraud was. I mean, look what Tim Walz overseeing. He's meant to be overseeing his state while fraud was just out of control. I want to move on to the economy. Donald Trump has, of course, been selling the message of economic success. And let's just look at this economist, Stephen Moore, shocking CNN explaining that the economy is actually doing well.
Look at the facts of the economy. It is a booming economy. The latest report is almost 5.5% growth in the fourth quarter, which is an incredible number. We haven't seen that in recent memory. We've got gas prices down. Inflation is headed down to the 2% target. Median family income last year was up $2,500. Those are people in the exact middle, adjusted for inflation. I mean, I could go on and on with the positive elements.
Alex, I don't know who would be more shocked, the panelists on CNN or their audience?
It takes a while for economic indicators to become reality in people's lives. I do think that it is starting to happen. A 5.5% growth rate is huge. That's enormous, but it is still a number. That's a number like when the stock market goes up. And so do people feel that in the price of the goods that they buy every day going down? Mostly no. And that's why the political numbers for the president and for the Republican Party are getting a little bit better, but they are not recovering to the point where they would like them to. The same thing you can see with the tariff revenue numbers. When you see real dollars and cents coming in from Trump tariffs, then it goes from being an intellectual argument to something that can actually help bring down the deficit. People feel that more, but it is still ultimately a faraway number in a faraway place that doesn't really affect their lives. It's a good thing, but is it going to change the way people vote? Not yet.
Well, the president has declared that he's jump-starting the American dream. Today, he's been launching Trump Account, which aims to build long-term financial security for millions of children by creating tax-advantaged investment accounts. Here is Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent explaining how this is going to help children get a kickstart on their finances.
The compound growth from Treasury's initial seed funding alone stands to make young Americans wealthy. Assuming historical growth rates continue, a single $1,000 deposit into a Trump account at birth should grow to an estimated amount of at least $500,000 by the age of retirement. The $1,000 seed from Treasury is exclusive to newborns. But keep in mind that any American below the age of 18 is also eligible to receive a tax-advantaged Trump account to begin saving for the future. Philanthropists, family, friends, employers, and states.
Brendan, what are your thoughts on this initiative?
I actually really like it. I think that we used to talk in this country about an ownership society and about getting more people to be able to invest in their future, invest in the market. I think it was Albert Einstein that called compound interest the most powerful force in the universe. And there's something to that. So I think it's a good policy. I think we need to continue to do things like cut taxes. We need to get spending under control. And then again, one thing we alluded to earlier was how great the economic growth has been. And those are some extremely good numbers, historic numbers, really, in terms of GDP. But I do want to get ahead of some other potential problems. I work on AI policy, for example, and the AI revolution is coming. So I'd love to see the president get with Congress and work on ways to make sure that we avoid things like massive layoffs or unemployment due to that revolution that's coming soon. But I think if anybody can do it, this president can. I think he and his team understand the economy just about better than any administration we've had in the last 100 years.
Well, activist and rapper Nicki Minaj made a surprise appearance at the US Treasury's Trump Account Summit, declaring that she is actually the president's #1 fan and the anti-Trump groups only make her more MAGA. Listen to this.
Well, I don't know what to say, but I will say that I am probably the president's #1 fan. And that's not going to change. And the hate or what people have to say, it does not affect me at all. It actually motivates me to support him more. And it's going to motivate all of us to support him more. We're not going to let them get away with bullying him and, the smear campaigns. It's not going to work, okay? He has a lot of force behind him, and God is protecting him. Amen.
Okay. Alex, it's interesting listening to that point there. Obviously, she claims she's Trump's #1 fan. I think a lot of people would be fighting for that title. But I think she makes a good point that the more kind of anti-Trump hate that is out there, that is targeting Donald Trump, I think it only boosts his support. I know we were speaking about the polling numbers earlier in the show, and it's not probably exactly where he would like them to be. But I think Nicki Minaj makes an interesting and probably true point there.
I think she does. His numbers are going up, certainly since November. That was a low. The government shutdown was a pretty negative time for his numbers, for Republicans' numbers. They've been rebounding since then and have continued to. She also reminds me of a finding that we had back in January in our public release, that most people, like 80% of people, 83% of people, I believe, think that they encounter misinformation on a daily basis. That's probably a reasonable figure. I think that I do, certainly. And so when I hear her say that no matter all the hate that comes in, I'm still his biggest fan, that tells me that she's turning off what she's hearing and that there are limits to how much the negative news can break through to her because people simply don't believe what they're hearing. That's likely a good and healthy response, but it is a product of an environment that is just rife with, if not misinformation, just throwing bombs and telling only one side of a story without ever giving any context or telling another side.
Brendan, Trump also told reporters this week that Cuba will be falling pretty soon, or be failing pretty soon, saying that the island's economy is collapsing, and now that Venezuela has stopped spending oil and money. Let's listen.
Well, we're going to see what happens with Cuba. I don't know, anybody interested in Cuba in this room? Not too many people. This is not a Cuba room, but that's all right. There are plenty of them around, especially in Miami. And Cuba will be failing pretty soon. Cuba is really a nation that's very close to failing.
Brendan, can I get your reaction?
Yeah, it makes me wonder if the president is foreshadowing some pressure that he and the administration are going to put on Cuba. Obviously, with the seizure of Maduro in Venezuela and the ability to cut off the oil there, that has put pressure on Cuba and on that regime. We know that Secretary of State Marco Rubio has a personal interest and a longstanding national security interest in reducing the influence of Cuba in the Western Hemisphere. The Cuban people have suffered under the regime for now 60 plus years under communism and socialism. And so I'm really hopeful that we can see some changes there in the country for the Cuban people, because they're a great nation, and I'd love to see this administration help make Cuba great again.
Alex, do you agree? Is Trump potentially foreshadowing something there?
It's possible. I think the Cuban regime has been teetering for a while. If it is a relatively inexpensive endeavor for the United States, then people will basically support it. We saw that people basically supported the actions in Venezuela. People basically supported the actions in Iran, a lot more so when it seemed like they had no cost to them. And so if that is what some kind of an action turns out to look like in Cuba, great. People are on board with that. If it's more costly than that, if there is a collapse of a system and people are getting violent and you see unrest, people don't like that. Americans don't like that. It brings back memories of the war on terror and unsuccessful attempts at nation building. I don't particularly see that in the cards for Cuba. And so if that's not what happens, then Trump will continue to be the luckiest president of my lifetime. And that doesn't seem terribly unlikely.
Signal Principal and pollster Alex Tarasio and CEO of the Alliance for Secure AI and political strategist Brendan Steinhauser. Thank you both so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Look, every country has its healthcare problems, but America's Medicare system is on another level. Millions of seniors end up on the wrong plan every year. They either overpay, lose access to their doctors, or both, not because they did anything wrong, but because the system is designed to confuse them. And it gets worse. a lot of Medicare advisors are really just salespeople pushing whichever plan pays them the biggest commission. That's why I want to tell all of my American Power Hour viewers about Chapter. Chapter doesn't work for big insurance or the government. They're independent. In fact, they're the only advisor that compares every Medicare plan nationwide to find one that actually fits your needs. On average, that saves people about $1,100 a year. Just have a read of the testimonials. One woman, Jill, said that Chapter showed her better options that didn't even appear on the Medicare.gov website. That's how broken the system is and how valuable it is to truly have someone on your side. So if you're looking for Medicare guidance, don't go it alone. Call the number below to speak with Chapter and get clear, unbiased guidance on your Medicare options. Joining us now is Morgan Begg, Director of Research at the IPA. Morgan Begg, thank you so much for your time. Let's start with what's happening in the UK. Nigel Farage's Reform UK party has poached another Conservative MP, this time the former UK Home Secretary Suella Braverman. Let's just take a listen to what she had to say.
The truth is that in recent years, I have found myself effectively in a social democrat, left-leaning party made up of Conservatives in name only. No wonder I have felt politically homeless for years.
And what she's lost isn't her career within the Conservative Party. What she's lost is her battle to get the Conservative Party in the place that she thought it ought to be.
Is this another win for Farage?
Undoubtedly, this is a big win for Farage. His ranks continue to grow. He really is presenting himself as the effective leader of the opposition in the United Kingdom right now. And what he's really taking advantage of is this: there is a genuine demand in the community for a centre-right option in politics. And the Conservative Party have completely failed to present that in recent years, and Reform are picking up that ball and running with it. Now, the danger is taking on too many members of that failed Conservative Party era into their own ranks, risks them becoming a second Tory party.
Yeah.
And, that's something they really need to be cautious of.
They do. Let's talk about Keir Starmer's flagship migrant deal. It's been branded a total farce by the opposition after the Home Secretary admitted that Labor has taken in more migrants from France than it has deported. It's been revealed that 350 asylum seekers have arrived under the one-in, one-out scheme, while just 281 have actually been removed in its first 6 months. So on average, it's only an average of 11 deportations a week since this scheme began in August last year. I mean, what a joke.
Yeah, as you said, it is a farce. My question is, since 2024, there have been almost 100,000 arrivals by small boats on British shores, and they've been given a free pass by the government: accommodation, food, phones. You got the works. And the question is, what is being done about the 100,000 people that are already there? Yeah, okay, there's a few hundred here going back, a couple of hundred going back. It's a drop in the bucket to the problem that the UK is going through.
And now Keir Starmer is in China. He's in Beijing, and he's there with his team. They will have burner phones and burner laptops. This is in an effort to stop being spied on during their trip. And this trip follows the approval of a new Chinese embassy in London. And Keir Starmer is under pressure from back home to raise several difficult subjects with Xi Jinping, including China's espionage activity. What are your thoughts around this trip and burner phones?
Oh, well, it just goes to show that the folly in so many of these Western governments, including Keir Starmer, chasing the golden goose of China, the big China dollars. And the big picture for Australia is, there is a Commonwealth of Nations. There are a community of nations in the world which account for almost $10 trillion in combined GDP, which have historical ties with the United Kingdom, which have deep friendship and cultural ties with the United Kingdom, which he could be pursuing trade with. And what he'll find is that it's much easier to engage in trade with a friend than it is to engage in trade with countries that they themselves acknowledge are high risk, to the point that they're not using their own devices. They're using burner phones. It's absurd.
I'm going to talk to you about Spain. Spain has begun legalising 500,000 undocumented migrants in a move the government says will blunt the rise of the far right. So to qualify, migrants must prove that they were living in Spain for at least 5 months before December 31, 2025, and show that they have no criminal record, and then successful applicants will be granted 1-year residence permits with the options to renew. The People's Party leader has warned that this regularisation will actually increase the pull effect and, of course, overwhelm public services. Do you agree with that?
Undoubtedly. I mean, this is, if you want a better example of the kind of elitist, out-of-touch, technocratic leadership that is so common in European countries, just look at Spain right now. The idea that arbitrarily changing the legal status of 500,000 migrants will somehow solve the problem is absurd. Of course, it will. This just effectively adds to the incentive structure, which is bringing people in. So this is... And I just have to take issue with this idea that they're doing this to blunt the rise of the far right. No, that is completely dishonest and disingenuous. This is not a far right concern. Mainstream people are concerned when their borders are not controlled. They're concerned if 500,000 people or however many people are in the country and who are not meant to be there.
Yeah.
So this is a mainstream concern, and I just find it so telling that the Spanish government would come out with this approach, essentially antagonising the mainstream concerns of the people rather than trying to do something which will actually represent their concerns.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Just finally, Russian state TV is issuing a chilling warning to Europe, with pundits boasting that Moscow could strike any part of the continent with impunity. On his show, The Evening with Vladimir Solovyov, Kremlin propagandist, seized on Donald Trump's comments around Greenland, claiming that Europe no longer has the protection of a US nuclear umbrella. So he even floated a Russia-US alliance and told viewers that Russia could hit Europe and Americans wouldn't retaliate, as questions grow over NATO's future. What do you make of this? How concerned should we be?
To be honest, not. I mean, this is as you say, it's a propagandist on Russian television, sort of making the case for a big, strong Russia. You know, and countries engage in saber rattling all the time. They want to look big. They want to look imposing. What it is a reminder of is the need for countries themselves to form an independent and effective deterrent option and not rely on countries like the United States. You know, the United States have been underwriting the security of the European Union and the United Kingdom and Australia, for that matter, for decades now. And we have to be conscious of the fact that, you know, whether that defence from the US will come through for us, it may be dependent on other extraneous circumstances. Maybe it will depend on who the president of the day is. We need to form an independent deterrent ourselves. In Australia, defence spending is still stuck at 2% of GDP. We have to get moving now. We have to build the defence capabilities in order to provide our own strategic and defence deterrence, so that we're not relying on other people to come to our defence.
Yeah, absolutely. Morgan Begg, Director of Research at the IPA, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
That is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. We'll see you next week. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.